Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. I had a customer come into the shop yesterday as we were closing up, and she's running around looking for a laundry bag. She goes away a lot in her caravan or camper van and wants something to be able to put all of her dirty washing into and then be able to take it to the laundromat when she needs to wash them. So she's asked me for a laundry bag. I thought, why not make a video? So here it is. She's going to come back in on the weekend and purchase it. It's given me the idea to be able to use up all those large quantities of upholstery fabric that I've got and those 2 rolls of denim fabric that I've got as well. So I think these laundry hampers are going to be a perfect idea for using up a bulk amount of fabric, and I can sell them in the shop. At least I hope so. So fingers crossed this pattern that I'm trying to work out will work and that she likes it, and hopefully I'll get some sales out of it. We'll see. I don't really have much of an idea of what I'm going to be doing. The only request is that it have a draw cord, and she's given me a couple of dimensions. So come along, help me nut it out, and we'll see what I can come up with. The first thing I want to do is draw a plan. I know the lady wants to have a bag that is about 24 inches wide by 30 inches tall. The first thing I'm going to do is draw my rough outline. So I've got the bag here with 24 inches across the base, and she wants it 30 inches high. So what I'm thinking, it's going to have a draw cord, and what I'm thinking is that I'd like to have a contrast at the top. So the fabric that I'm using on the outside, I'll most likely use a denim or an upholstery fabric. So I'm going to use a blue fabric. Then I'm going to have a red contrast around the top. That's also going to be the channel for the draw cord. And then I'll have a couple of handles coming off there as well. And I also want to have boxed corners. The boxed corners, I think I'm going to make them 5.5 inches each. And what that will do is give me 11 inches across the base. Because I want to have my bag finished at 24 inches at the bottom, I'm going to need to add the boxing. So if I'm using 5.5 inches, I'm going to need to add the 24 inches to the 5.5 inches twice. So this is the base of your bag. You'll have 24 inches across there, and around here it'll be about 10 to 11 inches by the time you take into account your seam allowances. For the handles, I'm going to use the strapping that I usually use, and then you just want to lay that along the top of your fabric, determine whereabouts you want them to finish. And I'm going to finish mine at about 3 inches from the top where that band is. So that will be the measurement for my handles, which will be about 26 inches. So what I know now is that I've got a 3-inch fold across the top. I've got 30 inches along here. I've also got that 5.5 inch box, so I need to add that as well. So I've got 30, 35.5 plus 3. That gives me 38.5 inches for the height of my bag, and then I've got 24 plus 11, so it's 35 inches for the width of my bag. Now that's all the fabric that I need to be able to start my project. This drawing will all make sense very soon. Okay, I have my fabric cut out based on what the customer wants. I've got 2 pieces of fabric for the outer bag. I'm using denim here, 35 inches by 38.5 inches. And I also have 2 pieces of fabric for my lining, which is also 38.5 inches by 35. I'll pop all the measurements up on the screen shortly. We also need some strapping for the handles, and we also need some cord to make the drawstring bag. Now I know this piece of fabric looks very wide, but keep in mind I'm taking into account this bag having 5.5 inch boxed corners. That will bring the side in, that's about 5.5 inches there, and same along this side. These 2 sides here will form part of the side of the actual bag. The bag itself won't be any wider than this. And then you've got the height. But again, with the height, you're going to take off several inches from the top for the fold over and also from the bottom for the boxing. Let's get started. Before we do anything, we're going to put our handles on our fabric. So this is the 35 inches at the top. Fold the fabric in half. Mark the centre. With a pin marked in the centre, make a mark 3 inches from either side And this will be the position of our handles. Once you've put your handles in place, take your lining fabric and we'll place that directly over the top. We're going to do this for both pieces and pin that together all the way across that 35-inch top section here. Then we'll take it to the machine and we're going to use a 1 centimetre or 3/8 inch seam allowance and sew all of that in place. As usual, when I go over any section that's got my handles, I'm going to sew over it and back and then forward again and do the same thing there and then continue along to the end. The top edges of the fabric have been sewn together. We're going to fold this over and have a decorative feature of the lining fabric shortly. What I want to do to make sure that the denim doesn't get seen on the underneath when this is folded over is understitch. Now understitching is pretty much the same as top stitching, just done in reverse. So what I want to do is have this seam here from the lining and the denim stitched onto the denim. So if I did this from the top, I'd be top stitching. I'm going to be doing it from the underneath, so I'm understitching. Open out your fabric, take this seam here and fold it over to the denim side of the main fabric and just fold that over, and we're going to stitch really close to the edge, right next to the stitching line that we've just done, and that will help prevent the denim from rolling back to the other side. Now I don't want to start understitching right on the very edge. I'm going to come in about 1 inch because that'll mean that there's going to be less bulk when I sew the side seams later. So start about 1 inch in from the edge. When you get to the section with the handle, make sure the handle just sits under the lining out of the way whilst you stitch this. And before you get to the end, stop about 1 inch from the side seam. So that understitching that we've done has ensured that the red lining is actually facing the denim fabric. So it's kind of rolled it back toward the denim a little bit. Normally when you're dressmaking, you'll actually do the understitching so that the lining sits underneath. But in this case, we want the lining to come forward a little bit. And that stops the blue denim from rolling back. When we fold this back by 3 inches, you're going to have that nice contrast band at the top and you're not going to have any of the denim peeking through. Doesn't really matter if it does peek through, but it just looks a little bit neater. And the handles will come up and sit like that. Now open out the fabric. So we're going to take the main fabric, spread that open, and we've got the lining and the main fabric separated. And we're going to make a mark at 1 inch from the stitching line, and that's from the actual seam line, not the understitching line. So mark 1 inch on the denim and 1 inch on the lining, and then we're going to make another mark 4 inches further down. So where this 1 inch mark is, mark 4 inches and 4 inches on the lining. We have your seam, 1 inch and then 4, 1 inch and 4, and we'll do that on both sides. Now we can grab both of our pieces of fabric, our back and front for both, open that out, have right side facing up on one of them and right side facing down on the other. We're going to line up our seams and we'll put a pin in place just to make sure everything's lined up properly, and do that at both sides. We've got our seams lined up right along the centre. Where you've made that 1 inch mark, pop a pin in there and also on the lining, and then come down to that line that we marked that's 4 inches further away. We can pop a pin in there and also on the main. So what's going to be happening here is that when we sew up the side seam, we're going to leave this open and we're going to leave this section open as well, but we're going to sew this side and all the way down along the side seams. This section that we're leaving open here is going to be for us to fold the fabric down later and also put the draw cord in, so we need to make an allowance for that. So that 4 inches there, leave it open and repeat that for this side as well. So both side seams have been pinned on what will be the top section of the bag. Leave it open 4 inches on either side, but sew it closed along the center section there. And then you can sew all the way down both long edges of the main bag and along the bottom edge as well. So we can close all of that up. With the lining, we can do the same thing, but we're going to leave a little bit of an opening so that we can turn the whole bag through later. And on the lining, I think this time round I'm going to leave my opening on the side seam. So on the side seam you've got all of this area here. In around about the center section here, leave about 6 inches open. I'll take this to the machine now. I'll sew this little section here, then I'll come down and start from here, go all the way around. Come back up to the other side, stop here with a back stitch, leave that open, back stitch here to here, leave this section open and then sew all the rest closed. And once again, I am doing a 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'll just back stitch here. This is the top section. You know I'm going to go and triple stitch that, I always do. Sew up to the pin, back stitch, leave that opening and continue on from the next pin. And sew to the end. I haven't bothered using pins on this, it's just basic straight sewing, but if you're more comfortable then go ahead and put some pins or clips in. And don't forget on the lining to leave an opening. So I'm going to sew up at least about 7 or 8 inches before I consider where I'm going to put my opening. And the reason for that is that I'm going to have a 5.5 inch boxed corner here shortly. So I don't want to leave an opening too close to that. So I'll probably sew up about 8 inches or so. Maybe even more. Back stitch there, then leave a gap of about 6 inches or so. I'm only leaving a gap that big because there's so much fabric here. As I come up to the pin on the other side, I'm going to stop and back stitch and start again at the next pin and back stitch at the beginning and the end. Secure the middle seam, and remove that pin and back stitch. Then come down to the next pin, back stitch and sew the rest of the bag together. And we'll get back up to the last pin and back stitch. And we've left our opening just on the side here and here. Now that we've got the side seams and the base all sewn up, open it all out. This is the center section where the lining and the main meet. And you've got this little section here that we've left open and also on the lining here. You can press this with an iron or just finger press that open just to set a crease in the side there. You don't need to worry about pressing the rest of it unless you prefer to. So this will naturally want to follow the same line as the seam that we've just done. So just place your finger down over the top and run it across there a few times, and you've got your crease marked on the main and the lining. Turn it around and repeat for the other side. We're going to box the corners of our bag now, and the size of the boxing that I had decided to do was 5.5 inches. So I have a stitching line along here and along here. So that's my stitching line, and I'm going to measure 5.5 inches from the stitching line from either side, and I'll draw a line. So that's my 5.5 inch square. I'll repeat that on the other side. Easiest way to do that, just place the two fabrics together, line them up in the corner, and we can just go and cut that straight out. Go to your lining, and we're going to do the same with the lining. We're just going to fold that in half. We don't even need to measure. My raw edges are here and my fold is over here. So we don't want to cut the folded section. Take the piece that you've just cut off on the main, place that over the edge there and cut that out. So there's our boxed corners on the lining, and we've done the same on the main, and you can see how far in this has come now. This is going to be the width of our bag. Open out the boxing, line up the seams on the side, and as usual we shall have them going in opposing directions. So I'll have the one facing me going to my left, the one away from me going to my right, and I'll line that up to the end. And we're going to do this on all four corners for the main and the lining. So the boxed corners are ready for all four corners of the bag. This is the main section here. If you take this section and follow the line all the way up through the lining and take this end of the lining that's on the same side and fold it across, bring it down to match up with your main. So you've got the same sides of your boxed sections matched up. Now you can go and take all of your boxed corners and sew straight across and do all four of them separately. The reason I'm going to join them is because when the lining is turned through, I want this lining to sit securely with the main fabric. So I don't want it to be fluffing about inside the bag because there's so much room inside there. When you take your clothes out, they might get tangled up. Socks and things like that might get tangled up. So if you line up the seam at the bottom there, and then just line up the rest of the seams, we can actually go and sew all of this all at once. And you will have seen me doing something similar when I made those great big giant utility bags. But this is so much easier because it's such a big project. This not only saves time, but it saves thread as well, because we're only going to be stitching this side and the other side. And I always double stitch all of my corners anyway. I will also double stitch this because I've got so much fabric. So that's one side done, and then we can go to the other side, find that as well, and follow the line along and bring that in line with each other as well, and then we can clip that together. So we've got a tangled mess in here, but we will take this to the machine now, sew all the way across there. That will secure both the lining and the main, and we'll do the same for the other side. Okay, back stitch beginning and the end, and I'm going to stitch this one twice. And one more time for good measure. And the other side. And now that we've done the boxed corners, we need to find our opening, and we'll turn the bag the right way around. You can see the lining here is actually connected to the bottom of the bag. When people have their washing in there, that's not going to come away and get caught up in their clothing. Go back up to the top and remember this section where we've left our fabric open and we've finger pressed the seam to the underside. So I've just popped a pin where we finger pressed that seam open earlier, and I'll do the same on the lining. So we've got the edges folded under for the lining and for the main. Line the fabric up so that you've got the lining and the denim on top of each other, and then with the edges folded under, I've pinned the lining and the denim sides together with the edges folded under, and I'm going to top stitch around the top edge. So I'm going to come across, up, across and down, and that will secure the lining section to the side seam and close everything up, and we'll do the same for the other side. So I've just placed the opening underneath the machine there. I'm going to come up this side, sew along the top, and then I'll come down the other side and sew along the bottom. And we'll do the same on the other side. There's our little opening here. This is so that we can feed the cord through the top of the bag. Now we can take our bag and we're going to fold this down. I'll start on the side. We're going to take the top edge with the lining being exposed and bring that down 3 inches. And you can see what happens here is that when you bring this down, you have a little opening just here. And this opening will allow us to bring our cord through. Fold the fabric over by 3 inches, and we can pin or clip that in place, and we'll do this all the way around the entire bag. So there's our little opening just there. Make sure that lines up nicely at the top there, and we'll do that all the way around the bag. When you come to the section that's got the handle, pin your 3 inches and then fold your handle up, and we'll pin that in place as well. This gives added strength to the bag so the handles aren't going to cause the fabric to tear. And when we sew the handle, we don't want to be stitching all the way down both sides because we still need to allow our cord to pass through the fabric. Okay, this is ready to go to the machine. Starting at the opening here, we're going to come along and do a top stitch close to the top of the edge here, about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Stitch all the way to the other end, and you're going to sew over the handles as well. Of course, I'll go over the handles a few times, and we'll do that all the way around the top edge. Once that's done, come to the bottom section here, and remember earlier I mentioned that we're going to understitch, and see how there's no blue peeking through at all, so we don't have any of that blue fabric peeking through at the top. All the red is perfectly aligned at the front, and that's because the understitching has forced that denim fabric to sit underneath. Anywhere along here now, we're going to sew all the way along the very bottom edge of this fabric now to secure that in place. So you're going to have it top stitched here, secure this as well. That will give us plenty of room in here for our cord to be pulled through. So let's take this to the machine, sew the top and sew the bottom. And the bottom edge can just be started anywhere and sew all the way around. If you're happy with the way everything looks, go back to the inside of the lining where the opening is. Just fold those side seams together, and then we can go and close that up. Now the only thing that's left to do is to put the cord in through the channel on the side here. Before we do that, this is the side of the bag where the boxed corners are, and this is the front section here, and you've got the bottom along here. So that's your bottom seam there and your side seam. This part's completely optional. If you want to have a bag that's a little bit more structured, open out your bag and make sure your lining is nice and level underneath. And we can sew from the base of the bag here all the way up to the bottom of the contrast at the top here. And as I said, this is optional. It helps the bag have a specific shape rather than just a great big floppy bag. So if you take a measurement from the center seam all the way along here out to the end of the boxed corner here, that measures about 6 inches. This is going to vary from one bag to the next. Your seam allowance will make a difference. All sorts of things can make a difference in the dimensions here. So I recommend taking your ruler and measuring from the center seam out to where the boxing is, determine what that measurement is, and then start clipping the same amount from the center all the way up. Once I've clipped one side, I'm going to turn the bag around. Just make sure that the lining is sitting right on the very edge of the fold there, and measure that same distance again, and I'll repeat that for both sides of the bag. When you've clipped the side edges on both sides of the bag and you're happy with that, bring these edges together, then go to the bottom of the bag and we can flip that open, and where you've got that boxed seam along the bottom there, just pull that taut and open out that seam, lay it flat. Do the same here, and we've got a nice fold along this edge here. And this is the bottom of our bag. You can also go and clip this together as well, and this will just form a nice boxed rectangle on the bottom of our bag. We'll do the same at the other side. So we've got our boxed flaps at the bottom there, and we've got our sides done. We'll take this to the machine. We'll sew that side, this side, both edges on this side and again on this side as well. And we're only going to sew up to the contrast fabric. And the reason we're not sewing any further is because we still have to get a draw cord in here. And if we stitch all the way up the top, you won't be able to do that. I'm starting at the base of the bag now, and I'm going to do a narrow top stitch just in between about 1/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. And I'm not going to start right on the very end. I'm going to come in about 1/4 of an inch. When I come to the end, I'm going to stop about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. And I will repeat this for all of the other edges that I've got clipped. For the side seams, I've stopped sewing just before the contrast. Our bag's looking quite neat now with the side edges top stitched and the bottom edges top stitched as well. All we need to do is put some cord in. Now, if you've gone and made the bag with these side edges top stitched, you may decide you don't want to have any cord in here at all. It is quite a nice looking bag just on its own, but once you've got your laundry in there, you're going to want to close it up. So what you want is 2 lengths of cord, at least the entire width of your bag all the way around. And then you want to have a little bit of a tail hanging out, so about 6 inches longer. So I'm using 72 inches. You can go about 75 inches if you want to just be safe. I seem to have misplaced my bodkin, so you can use a large safety pin. I've got a pair of tweezers here. I'm just going to put the cord to the end of the tweezers there, leave a fair tail. You can tie this if you want to, or tape it. I think I'll risk it. Thread that all the way through to the other side. When you come out of the first half, continue on to the other side. And come back out to where you've started. If you don't have toggle bolts, at this point all you need to do is tie your cord together in a knot and make sure it doesn't slip any further. I do have toggle bolts, so I'm going to use 2 of these, one at each end of the bag. And what I've done is just put some tape over the edge of the cord, because this cord's quite thick. And I'll just tape the cord, and with a bit of a taper so that the tape will actually go through the toggle. Squeeze the toggle together and then push the cord through. I can cut that off and then I can knot that. Grab the other one and we'll squeeze that together again here and pop it through. So we've got a toggle at this end, and I'm going to put some cord through again. So starting from the opposite end, I'm going to feed my cord in through at this side. In the same way, I'll come in here all the way around and come out here, and then I'll pop a toggle on the end here as well. Okay, our toggles are done, and as I said, if you don't have toggles, just tie them in a knot. So once you've got this bag full of washing, you can pull the cord together, tie that, then you can just lug it over to the laundromat. Well, here it is. It doesn't look like much here. It just looks like a great big sack of clothes. And having a look at it, I think it would actually make a great Christmas Santa sack. This is huge. It will store loads and loads of Christmas goodies. So this isn't going to be just useful as a laundry bag. It's going to be great as a toy bag as well, or, you know, for soft toys and things, or kids' toys. Make it in Christmas fabric and this will make an amazing Santa sack. It's huge. It's going to hold a lot of clothing or washing, and I actually think it looks a lot better when it's all folded up and everything. So let's have a look at it. It's quite wide when you look at it this way, but once you take into account the boxed corners, it's actually the right width for the customer. So if you have a look at the bag when it's all folded together on the sides, it's really not that big. So it's actually going to pack away nice and neatly in somebody's travel bag, and then it'll expand really well for all of the dirty washing that you might need to put in there. I think it's turned out all right. I hope the lady's going to be happy with it. As I said, I didn't really have much of a plan when I started. I certainly wasn't going to have the top stitched edges on the bag. All I knew was that I was going to have a drawstring. So it's probably gone a little bit further than what I'd anticipated in the first place. And I think I even told the lady I wasn't even going to bother going to any trouble to line it. But I've done all of that. I think the bag's turned out all right. Hopefully she'll like it. And we'll see if she ends up buying it. Because I've not paid for any of the fabric in this project, the only thing I've paid for is the handle and the cord and the little toggles. Probably $2 worth of material. It's taken me a little bit of time only because this is the first one that I've done. If I choose to make these for the shop, and I guess I'll be guided by the customer, if I choose to make this particular style for the shop, I'll probably put about $55 to $65 on it. It was a little bit labour intensive for me, but what I would do then is go and make up a few and see exactly how long it took me to make them. I'm going to sell this one to her if she wants it for $45. If not, I'll just put it in the shop at that price. I don't mind doing that for my first items, but anything after that I will always charge my time properly. So I'll see how it goes. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.